Russia bombs Ukraine's largest children's hospital. The young patients, parents, and staff who ran for their lives, and what Ukraine's president is vowing to do next. Also, on this Monday night, a defiant dare to U.S. Democrats. President Joe Biden's challenge to those saying he needs to quit.
The American public is not going to move away from me.
The heat is on across Canada. How high temperatures could soar, and for how long? And the circle of life.
The sharks are still feeding.
Nova Scotians watch what's being called one of nature's greatest spectacles.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Carolyn Jarvis.
The harrowing moment, a missile made a direct hit on Ukraine's largest children's hospital during a new wave of Russian attacks. The hospital in Kyiv is the country's main treatment center for kids with cancer. 2 adults are confirmed dead, and rescuers are racing to find survivors in the ruins. Good evening, and thanks for joining us. The mayor of Kyiv has declared tomorrow a day of mourning. At least 36 people have been killed across the country in one of the deadliest series of attacks in months. Russia is once again denying it targeted the hospital or any civilians. Crystal Goomansingh has our top story tonight and a warning. Some of the images are disturbing.
This was Omedid Children's Hospital in Kyiv, one of 2 medical facilities hit along with 50 civilian sites, according to the State Emergency Service of Ukraine. We came here 5 minutes before it all happened. We managed to get to the pediatric ward. I don't know. The shock of Ukraine's largest children's hospital in ruins, combined with accounts of near misses from staff and parents with sick children. New mom Svetlana tries to stop herself from shaking as her husband Vladimir explains she didn't go to the hospital but ran to a bomb shelter with their baby instead. He tries to comfort them as teams comb the debris, searching for those who weren't as fortunate. Destruction at the children's hospital included the ICU, surgical, and oncology departments.
Вшанувати їхню пам'ять хвилиною мовчання.
Ukraine's president was in Poland signing a security agreement at the time of the attacks and asked for a moment of silence to honor the victims. Russia said it carried out strikes on military targets.
I would like to say that this is unprecedented, but it isn't. We all remember the horrific scenes from Mariupol in the early days of the war. This is an act of barbarism that must be condemned by the international community.
Amnesty International says based on videos of the strike it has reviewed, the destruction appears to be the result of a Russian cruise missile, as Ukraine has suggested.
We hear so much about the resilience of Ukrainians, but I can tell you that Ukrainians today were shaken to the core by what happened.
Vladimir Zelensky has vowed revenge, but any response requires Western weapons, and the president has lamented the slow trickle of support from allied nations. Crystal Goomansingh, Global News, London.
The question of how to support Ukraine and punish Russia will be among the main topics discussed at this week's NATO summit in Washington. Ukraine isn't a member of the alliance yet, but President Volodymyr Zelensky will attend as talks get underway on Tuesday. Today, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau arrived and was challenged by another key theme of the summit, Canada's failure to meet NATO targets for defense spending. Our Ottawa Bureau Chief, Mercedes Stevenson, reports.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau descended from CanForce One into a sweltering Washington, D.C. day. The Humidex won't be the only heat the Canadian Prime Minister is expected to feel, though, in the U.S. Capitol.
The goal is 2%. It was a commitment everybody made 10 years ago. Not everybody's there.
The Biden administration has been asking Canada to increase defense spending for years, as the Trump and Obama administrations did before that.
Our allies have lost patience with us.
Canada is one of only 2 countries in the alliance that does not spend 2% of GDP and has no plan to get there.
Has moved within NATO from being a bit of an outlier to being the outlier in the entire alliance.
Allies are already beginning to look beyond that number.
On the 2.5%, look, we are committed to it.
2% is passé now. I think most countries are heading well beyond that because they believe that 2% is not sufficient.
The Liberal government points to defense spending going up, but new figures from Canada's budget watchdog suggest the government has overstated its planned defense spending. The government says military spending will hit 1.76% of GDP in 5 years. But the parliamentary budget officer found the peak will be much lower, 1.49% next year, and then tapering off.
There's going to be some consequences. They may not be overt and they may not get publicly stated, but Canada's increasingly not on the inner circle at the alliance.
Canada's ambassador in Washington insists that Canada remains in good standing.
I am not saying that the pressure that you recognize isn't there. It is, but it is also coupled with a strong recognition that Canada is a steadfast ally in all respects.
Canada could still avoid a public reprimand at this summit. As frustrated as allies are with defense spending, there are deep concerns about internal alliance unity, especially in the face of elections in Europe and the United States. The interest could well be in presenting a strong, united public face rather than airing grievances. Carolyn?
Mercedes Stevenson in Washington, thank you. As world leaders descend on Washington, America's leader is fighting back over calls for him to step aside. U.S. President Joe Biden says he is firmly committed to running for re-election and has openly called for any naysayers within his own party to challenge him if they want. But as Jackson Prosco reports, the forceful rebuke has done little to silence critics who say Biden is not fit for another 4 years in the White House.
After a weekend fighting for his political life, President Joe Biden turned up the pressure with a letter to Democrats and a surprise interview, all but daring his party to oust him.
I've got a pretty good political instinct and eye. And here's the deal. It's not going to happen here this time around. The American public is not going to move away from me as an average voter.
Like Biden, the questions aren't going anywhere. With reports a Parkinson's specialist met with the White House physician this year. The White House won't confirm why. While polls show the president falling behind Donald Trump in every single battleground state.
Joe Biden is running against a criminal. It should not be even close, and there's only one reason it is close, and that's the president's age.
A stunning 72% of voters now say they believe Biden does not have the mental and cognitive health to serve as president.
We're on the Titanic. All of us see the icebergs dead ahead. The captain is saying, I've got this. Don't believe that those are real icebergs. And by the way, I got you here just fine. So get out of my way.
Ted Dintersmith is a major Democratic donor, one of several calling on Biden to drop out and for the party to hold a rapid contest to find someone new.
Why a blitz primary and not just hand it right over to the vice president? Make it simple.
That's not the way to do this. She would be better off. The party would be better off. The whole election would be transformed if we showcase a number of people with compelling visions.
It would take Biden's blessing for that to happen.
If any of these guys don't think I should run against me, go ahead, announce for president. Challenge me at the convention.
All the while, Donald Trump is going unchallenged. Democrats worry by trying to save his campaign, Biden risks destroying his own legacy and the party's chances in November. Jackson Prosco, Global News, Washington.
At least 2 deaths have been reported in the Houston area after Hurricane Beryl slammed into southeastern Texas, leaving more than 2 million people without power.
Wow, we're really getting hammered here.
Damaging storm surge, heavy rain, and fierce wind pummeled the region as Beryl made landfall as a Category 1 hurricane this morning. High waters quickly shut down streets in Houston, with stranded motorists needing to be rescued. Beryl has weakened to a tropical storm, but it has the potential to deliver dangerous conditions and torrential rain as it moves north and inland towards southern Ontario. In the western U.S., it's not rain but searing heat that's causing concern. More than 50 million people from southwestern Arizona to Washington state are under some kind of heat alert today. Records have been broken in several states, with official temperatures topping 53 degrees in California's Death Valley, where the heat was blamed for at least 1 death over the weekend. Excessive heat and humidity are also intensifying wildfires out west, with one of the most notable, Santa Barbara's Lake Fire, quadrupling in size since Friday. Well, here in Canada, more than 20 heat records were shattered in British Columbia over the weekend, with temperatures reaching north of 40 degrees in parts of the interior. Environment Canada says cooler temperatures could still be days away, and it's urging millions of Canadians outside of BC to prepare as scorching heat marches east. Neethu Garsha reports.
People are bracing for a prolonged heat wave.
Once it's really hot, it's not fun to just be playing in the backyard, so I like to come here to cool off.
As temperatures soar across the country, from Halifax to Vancouver, there are heat warnings in several areas. For Western Canada, in the region's first widespread heat event of the year, the forecast is scorching. Daytime highs are expected to reach 35 degrees in parts of Alberta and Saskatchewan. The heat expected to hit Manitoba by Wednesday.
The greatest outdoor show on earth.
And with major events like the Calgary Stampede, people are being urged to take extra precautions.
Medical on site, additional water refill stations and misting stations, and just providing those spaces where people can cool off.
In BC's southern interior, temperatures are forecast to hit the low 40s.
5, 10, even in through the BC interior, 15 degrees above average during the day, above average warm nights too, and more record-breaking temperatures expected, especially through the west in the coming days.
Here in BC, it may be harder to escape the heat. A recent Statistics Canada study found just 1 in 3 BC households, or 32%, have access to air conditioning, the lowest rate in Canada.
It's hard to really recognize heat illness in yourself, so it's important to have a bit of a buddy system to check in on each other, and that could be in person or perhaps schedule some phone calls.
Starting to see the edge of this event on Wednesday, where we would expect temperatures to be a few degrees cooler, but still quite a bit above seasonal temperatures throughout the rest of the week and even into next weekend.
Experts reminding people to be alert because the extreme temperatures can impact everyone's health. Neethu Garsha, Global News, Vancouver.
The federal government is making changes to its national dental care plan as it tries to get more dentists on board. Today, Health Minister Mark Holland announced dental care providers can now treat patients covered by the plan on a case-by-case basis without officially joining the program themselves.
You can just try it out, submit a claim, and see what you think. And what we've been able to see is in communities where providers try the program, they're able to talk to other providers and say, actually, this is a fantastic experience.
Holland says providers must directly submit claims to insurance company Sun Life, which Ottawa has contracted for the program. They cannot bill patients in full up front. Dental associations have raised concerns that the federal government could reassess claims at a later date. Holland says just under 50% of dental professionals have signed up for the program. The federal Fisheries Department will be launching an external review into the conduct of its officers who allegedly arrested and dumped 2 Indigenous men at a gas station without shoes or phones. The 2 Mi'kmaq fishers from Cape Breton say they were arrested near Shelburne, Nova Scotia on March 26th and were forced to walk for about 6 hours before they could get help. Fisheries Minister Diane Leboutillier says the allegations are unacceptable and that she's met with one of the men. She says an external review panel will be announced later this month and will involve Indigenous leadership. A report will be made public once the review is complete. Political upheaval in France. Coming up, the uncertainty hanging over the country after a snap election. Israeli forces launched a new offensive in Gaza today. Tanks and troops moved into Gaza City in what residents called one of the most intense Israeli bombardments since October 7th. According to the Hamas-run health ministry, at least 40 people have been killed in the last day. The new offensive comes as Egypt, Qatar, and the U.S. are stepping up efforts to broker a ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas. Well, with the Olympics just weeks away, France may be facing a long period of political uncertainty. The snap election called by President Emmanuel Macron has ended in a hung parliament. And while a coalition on the left may have won the most seats, the far right received more votes than any other. Redmond Shannon reports.
As one French newspaper put it,
Now what do we do? We are in a completely unprecedented situation, says this re-elected lawmaker. A three-way hung parliament in France, where none of the three main factions will work together. For the first time in an election's second round, the far-right National Rally Party won the most votes, but its alliance finished third in seats. A new leftist group of parties has the most lawmakers, ahead of President Emmanuel Macron's centrists. Far-right leader Jordan Bardella blamed the other factions for the situation. The centre and left withdrew 200 candidates before the second round to block the national rally.
Et c'est un devoir pour le président de la République.
This far-left lawmaker urged Macron to appoint a prime minister from his grouping. But the new Popular Front in red only has a third of seats in the Assembly. One possibility being suggested is that the group's more moderate parties break away to work with Macron's centrists and the centre-right to form a majority. But any new government led by Macron's party would enrage just about everyone else. Macron has asked the outgoing Prime Minister Gabriel Attal to stay in place until a solution is found.
There have also been talks of appointing someone who's not in Parliament. It's possible in France to have a Prime Minister or a Minister who is not a member of Parliament.
How long negotiations take is anyone's guess.
We don't really have a precedent for this in the history of the Fifth Republic, and there's no limit for this.
Just like last week's British election, the left may have won the most seats, but the results were both driven in part by the steady rise of the far right. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
Toxins in tampons. Ahead, what you need to know about a new US-led study. A study led by a U.S. researcher found tampons may contain a variety of metals, including toxic lead, arsenic, and cadmium. Researchers tested 30 tampons from 14 brands in the U.S. and Europe and found measurable concentrations of 16 metals. In many cases, the amounts were minuscule, but no amount of lead is considered safe. It's believed the metals may come from the agricultural or manufacturing processes. More research is needed to determine whether the metals can be absorbed into the body. Global News reached out to Health Canada for comment, but so far there has been no response. Boeing is set to plead guilty to a fraud charge connected with two deadly 737 MAX crashes that killed 346 people more than 5 years ago. According to the U.S. Justice Department, Boeing will pay a $243 million fine and invest more than $455 million in compliance and safety programs. The plea deal, which still needs to be approved by a federal judge, means Boeing will avoid a criminal trial. Many victims' families are not pleased with the outcome. A flawed flight control system was implicated in both deadly crashes. Last month, prosecutors said Boeing violated a 2021 deal that shielded the company from prosecution. Well, there's a major shakeup in Hollywood as Paramount Global has agreed to merge with Skydance Media. For decades, Paramount was largely owned by the Redstone family, but this deal will see the family step away with a new infusion of cash in the company. Paramount has over 1,000 films in its library, including Top Gun and The Godfather. Skydance was founded by David Ellison, the son of billionaire Oracle founder Larry Ellison. If the merger receives regulatory approval, the combined company will be called New Paramount and would be valued at $28 billion. Feeding frenzy. Next, a rare look at the power of nature off Nova Scotia's coast. We cap off our newscast tonight with incredible footage captured off the coast of Nova Scotia. Two sharks were seen feeding on a whale carcass, giving us a rare glimpse at the circle of life. Megan King has the story.
Just took off. He's going out. Nova Scotians in the Port Mattoon area experiencing a first-hand look at a rare sight over the past few days. Fishermen in the area have recorded a feeding frenzy, the aftermath of the death of a humpback whale.
It's not very often that, a whale, lands in your backyard, that it's just there floating around and Mother Nature doing its thing, cycle of life. So it's not going to waste.
Local fisherman Bill Vanu heard a whale carcass was attracting sharks near his home and went out to see for himself.
As soon as I come up on it and turned the boat around, there was one come right up and latched right on it right away. And yeah, from there on, it was pretty impressive to watch.
Witnessing at least 4 different white sharks at the scene, he estimates the largest at roughly 14 feet, nearly the length of his boat.
This is probably one of nature's greatest spectacles.
Researcher Hammerschlag taking the opportunity to observe white sharks in the area. He says the humpback would have been viewed as a wide-open buffet.
For a shark, that's a really important food source. And I actually think that usually these things happen far off in the open ocean and we don't get to see it. This is a rare opportunity where animal has died and we get to see nature taking its course.
At times, we've actually had reports of sharks either visibly feeding off the animal, or you can actually tell by the bite wounds on the side of the carcass. So it does happen quite often in some places, depending on if, of course, there are sharks in that area.
The Marine Animal Response Society received a report of a 25-foot whale carcass back on July 2nd. Wimmer saying whenever these reports come in across the maritime provinces, sharks follow.
Sort of as Mother Nature intends, they actually become really important food sources for other animals. And that's what we're seeing with white sharks. It's been well documented that they will feed on a fresh whale carcass, actually.
White sharks in Canada are an endangered species, meaning Wimmer says it's a good thing to see these sharks in our waters and finding nutritional food sources. Megan King, Global News.
And that is Global National for this Monday night. I'm Carolyn Jarvis. Tonight's Your Canada is Emerald Lake near Carcross, Yukon. We love seeing your Canada. Please email your photos to viewers@globalnational.com. Thanks for watching. Hope you'll join us again tomorrow night. Have a great night.